birthday, and I am 28. I will smack a big bitch. What that gonna do? I'll send you right to the Lord.
June 25th, 2023. A date that should have been filled with cake, laughter, and birthday wishes. Instead, it became the day that Kansas City would remember for all the wrong reasons. 28-year-old Jassity Strong was supposed to blow out candles and make a wish. She was supposed to hug her children goodnight and wake up to thank you messages from friends. But sometimes, life has other plans. Sometimes, the very moment you're celebrating another year of existence becomes the moment your story ends. What happened to Jassity that night wasn't just a tragedy. It was a cruel twist of fate that turned celebration into devastation. Jassity Jazz Strong wasn't just another name in the headlines. She was a force of nature wrapped in a 28-year-old package. The kind of person who could light up a room just by walking into it. Born and raised in Kansas City, Missouri, Jazz had that infectious energy that made everyone around her feel special. Her family knew her as the jokester, the one who could turn any ordinary moment into something memorable. Whether it was a random Tuesday or a family gathering, Jassity had this gift for making people smile. She didn't just exist in spaces, she transformed them. But beyond the laughter and good times, Jassity was building something beautiful. She was a devoted mother to 2 young children, a son and a daughter, who were her entire world. Every decision she made, every dream she chased, revolved around giving them the best life possible. By day, she worked as a certified nursing assistant, spending her hours caring for seniors with the same tenderness she showed her own family. By night, she transformed into a self-taught makeup artist, her creative spirit flowing through every brushstroke and color blend. Jassity wasn't just surviving, she was thriving, creating a life filled with purpose and love. June 25th marked another milestone in Jassity's journey. 28 years of life, love, and dreams realized and yet to be fulfilled. The celebration was planned at Perfect Touch Auto, a local business near the intersection of 57th Street and Prospect Avenue that had become a go-to spot for family gatherings in the community. It wasn't fancy, but it was theirs, a place where Kansas City families could come together without pretense. The kind of venue where real relationships were celebrated, where laughter echoed off the walls, and where memories were made. The guest list was filled with the people who mattered most. Family members who had watched Jassity grow from a little girl into the remarkable woman she'd become, friends who knew her infectious laugh by heart, and loved ones who understood that when Jazz threw a party, it was going to be special. The music was ready, the decorations were up, and everyone was prepared to celebrate another year of Jassity Strong's beautiful, vibrant life. Before we continue with Jassity's story, I want to hear from you. Have you ever had a celebration that took an unexpected turn? Drop a comment below and let me know. Your experiences help build our community here, and I read every single one of your responses. As the sun set on June 25th, 2023, Jassity had no way of knowing that the hours ahead would change everything. The woman who had spent 28 years bringing joy to others, who had built a career around caring for people, who had poured her heart into raising her children, she had no idea that this birthday celebration would be her last. The laughter echoing through Perfect Touch Auto that night would soon be replaced by something far more devastating. What started as a night of pure happiness was about to become a nightmare that would shake Kansas City to its core. Perfect Touch Auto wasn't your typical party venue, but that's exactly what made it perfect for Jassity's celebration. Located in the heart of Kansas City, this local business had opened its doors to families who wanted a space that felt authentic and welcoming. The owner understood that sometimes the best parties happen in the most unexpected places. As guests began arriving that evening, the parking lot filled with cars carrying people who had traveled from across the city to honor Jassity. Aunts, uncles, cousins, childhood friends, and work colleagues, all united by their love for the birthday girl. Her mother, Tamika Jenkins, watched with pride as more and more familiar faces appeared. Her aunt, Trish Mitchell, helped coordinate the evening, making sure everything was just right for Jassity's special day. This wasn't just a birthday party. It was a family reunion, a celebration of community, and a testament to the relationships Jassity had built throughout her 28 years of life. The music pumped through speakers as Chastity moved through the crowd, greeting everyone with her signature smile. Her children played nearby, their laughter mixing with the conversations of adults catching up on life. The air was filled with the sounds of celebration, jokes being shared, stories being told, and memories being created. Family members who hadn't seen each other in months reconnected over shared plates of food. Friends from different chapters of Chastity's life met for the first time, bonded by their common love for the woman of the hour. This was Chastity in her element, surrounded by the people who mattered most, creating the kind of night she would treasure forever. The clock struck 4:30 in the morning, and most of the guests were still enjoying themselves. What had started as an evening celebration had naturally extended into the early hours, the way the best parties often do. Nobody was in a hurry to leave. This was family time, and family time doesn't follow a schedule. But outside in the parking lot, something was happening that would shatter this perfect night forever. An altercation had begun between individuals who weren't part of Chastity's celebration. Voices were raised, tensions escalated, and what should have remained a verbal disagreement was about to turn deadly. The first gunshot rang out like thunder in the night. Then another, and another. The sound of celebration inside Perfect Touch Auto was instantly replaced by screams of terror and confusion. Guests who had been laughing moments before were now running for cover, trying to protect themselves and their loved ones. In those horrific moments, 3 lives were cut short. 5 others were wounded, their bodies bearing the physical scars of a violence that had nothing to do with them. The parking lot that had welcomed families just hours earlier was now a crime scene, forever changed by senseless brutality. Chastity Strong, the birthday girl who had brought everyone together, was gone. At just 28 years old, her life was stolen in an instant. Camden Brown, 29 years old, had come to celebrate with friends and never made it home. Nico Manning, only 22, had his entire future ahead of him before it was ripped away. 3 families would never be the same. 3 sets of dreams, hopes, and plans were destroyed in a matter of seconds. These weren't statistics or headlines. They were real people with real lives, real families, and real futures that would never be realized. Nate Gatson, the owner of Perfect Touch Auto, never expected his business to become the site of such devastation. As someone who had opened his doors to families seeking a place to celebrate life's precious moments, he was left grappling with an unimaginable reality. His own family members were among those caught in the crossfire that night. Speaking to reporters in the aftermath, Gatson's voice carried the weight of profound grief and disbelief. They were here to celebrate their born day, and it ended up being their death day. And it's not fair, he said, his words capturing the cruel irony that would haunt everyone who knew the victims. Witnesses described the scene as chaos beyond comprehension. People who had been dancing and laughing just moments before were suddenly diving for cover, trying to shield their children and elderly relatives from the gunfire. The sounds of celebration were replaced by screams, crying, and the desperate calls of people trying to locate their loved ones in the darkness. Those who survived the shooting would carry these memories forever. The image of Chastity's smile just hours before, the sound of bullets cutting through the night air, and the devastating realization that their friend would never go home again. The violence that claimed 3 lives didn't start inside the celebration. It erupted in the parking lot adjacent to Perfect Touch Auto. According to witnesses and police reports, an argument broke out between individuals who had no connection to Chastity's birthday party. What began as a heated exchange of words quickly escalated beyond anyone's control. The people inside the venue were innocent bystanders, caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. They had come to celebrate life, not to become victims of someone else's conflict. The altercation that sparked the shooting was completely separate from the joyful gathering happening just yards away. This tragic reality made the loss even more senseless. Chastity, Camden, and Nico weren't involved in whatever dispute led to the gunfire. They were simply people who had chosen to spend their Saturday night celebrating with family and friends. Their only crime was being present when violence erupted around them, turning them into casualties of a conflict that had nothing to do with their lives. While 3 lives were lost that night, 5 others survived with wounds that would serve as permanent reminders of the violence. These survivors faced their own battles, physical recovery, emotional trauma, and the complex feelings that come with surviving when others didn't make it home. Each of the 5 wounded individuals had their own story of survival, their own journey of healing ahead of them. Some suffered gunshot wounds that required immediate surgery. Others faced long-term rehabilitation. All of them would carry the psychological scars of witnessing their friends and community members lose their lives in such a brutal way. I want to pause here and ask you something important. Has gun violence affected your community? Have you lost someone to senseless shootings like this? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your voice matters, and together we can keep these conversations alive. Emergency responders flooded the scene within minutes of the first 911 calls. Paramedics worked frantically to save lives while police officers secured the area and began their investigation. The parking lot that had welcomed families just hours earlier was now cordoned off with yellow tape. Ambulances rushed the wounded to local hospitals while family members desperately tried to account for their loved ones. Phone calls were made, text messages sent, and social media posts shared as the community tried to piece together what had happened and who had been affected by the tragedy that forever changed their lives. No mother should ever have to receive the phone call that Tamika Jenkins got in the early morning hours of June 26. The kind of call that shatters your world in an instant, that makes time stop and your heart forget how to beat. The voice on the other end delivered news that no parent is ever prepared to hear. They sang Jazz is dead. Tamika would later recall, her voice breaking as she remembered that moment. The words didn't make sense at first. How could her vibrant, laughing daughter, the one who had been celebrating her birthday just hours before, be gone? How could someone so full of life suddenly have no life left at all? The phone call came from someone who had been at the party, someone who had witnessed the horror firsthand. They tried to explain what had happened, tried to make sense of the senseless, but the words felt impossible to process. Chastity had been shot. She was gone. The celebration had turned into a nightmare. Tamika's immediate response was denial, the mind's natural defense against unbearable truth. This couldn't be real. This had to be some terrible mistake. Her daughter was supposed to come home, supposed to call and thank everyone for making her birthday special. We said, "You lying." Tamika Jenkins remembered, describing the family's initial reaction to the devastating news. Those 2 words captured everything: the shock, the refusal to accept reality, the desperate hope that this was all some cruel misunderstanding. How could Chastity be gone when she had been so alive just hours before? The family gathered together, clinging to each other as they tried to process what they were being told. Phone calls were made to hospitals, hoping against hope that there had been some mistake, that Chastity was injured but alive somewhere. Maybe she was unconscious. Maybe she was in surgery. Maybe there was still time to save her. But as the hours passed and the confirmations came in, the terrible truth became undeniable. Chastity Strong, the daughter who brought light into every room, the mother who lived for her children, the woman who had spent her 28th birthday surrounded by love. She was never coming home again. The most heartbreaking reality of Chastity's death was the 2 young lives forever changed by her absence. Her son and daughter, who had kissed their mother goodbye before she left for her birthday celebration, would never feel her embrace again. They would never hear her voice calling them for dinner, never see her face light up when they accomplished something new. These children, who had been the center of Chastity's universe, now faced a future without the woman who had dedicated her life to their happiness and well-being. Their grandmother and extended family would step in, but nothing could fill the void left by their mother's love. In the days following the tragedy, Kansas City came together to honor the lives that were lost. Vigils were organized where community members gathered to light candles, share memories, and support the grieving families. The sidewalks and fences near Perfect Touch Auto became a canvas of love and remembrance. Chalk messages appeared everywhere, names written in bright colors, hearts drawn by children, and words of comfort from neighbors who had never met Chastity but felt her loss deeply. Balloon releases filled the sky with colors, each one carrying prayers and memories heavenward. The community refused to let these lives be forgotten. The Kansas City Police Department faced an uphill battle from the moment they arrived at Perfect Touch Auto. The crime scene was complex, with multiple victims, numerous witnesses, and evidence scattered across the parking lot. Detectives had to separate the chaos of the celebration from the violence that had erupted outside. Witness interviews proved challenging as traumatized partygoers struggled to recall details from the horrific night. Many had been focused on protecting themselves and their loved ones when the shooting began, making it difficult to provide clear accounts of what they had seen. The darkness of the early morning hours further complicated their ability to identify suspects. Physical evidence collection required meticulous work. Shell casings had to be located and cataloged, blood evidence documented, and the entire scene processed while maintaining the integrity of potential clues. Each piece of evidence needed to be carefully preserved for future prosecution. The investigation team knew they were working against time. In cases like these, the first 48 hours are critical for gathering information and identifying suspects. But with limited witness cooperation due to trauma and fear, and the complexity of separating partygoers from potential perpetrators, the case presented significant obstacles that would test even the most experienced investigators. As days turned into weeks without arrests, the families of Jassity, Camden, and Nico grew increasingly frustrated with the pace of the investigation. Every morning brought the same devastating reality. Their loved ones were gone, but no one had been held accountable for taking their lives. Tamika Jenkins and the other grieving families found themselves caught in an agonizing waiting game. They understood that investigations take time, but their pain demanded answers that seemed to remain just out of reach. The lack of immediate arrests felt like a second betrayal, as if the system was failing their loved ones even in death. Family members began reaching out to local media, hoping that public pressure might help move the case forward. They organized press conferences and community meetings, refusing to let their loved ones become forgotten statistics. Their message was clear. These weren't just victims of violence. They were real people with real families who deserved justice. The emotional toll of waiting for answers while grieving such profound loss created an unbearable burden for families already struggling to cope with their new reality. Jassity's death wasn't an isolated incident. It was part of a larger crisis plaguing Kansas City. The year 2023 had already seen too many families torn apart by gun violence, too many communities left to pick up the pieces after senseless shootings. The statistics painted a grim picture of a city struggling with an epidemic that seemed to touch every neighborhood. Local leaders recognized that traditional law enforcement approaches weren't enough to address the root causes of the violence. The shootings were happening at parties, on street corners, in parking lots, places where people should feel safe. Young people were dying at alarming rates, leaving behind grieving parents and traumatized communities. The Perfect Touch auto shooting highlighted how innocent bystanders were becoming casualties in conflicts that had nothing to do with them. Families celebrating life were being caught in crossfire, turning joyful gatherings into crime scenes. The community demanded action, but the solutions weren't simple or quick to implement. In response to the escalating violence, Kansas City officials accelerated the implementation of the Safe KC initiative. This comprehensive program represented a new approach to addressing gun violence by focusing on the small percentage of individuals responsible for the majority of shootings in the city. The initiative combined law enforcement efforts with community outreach, offering pathways away from criminal activity for those willing to change their lives. Social workers, community leaders, and former gang members worked together to identify at-risk individuals and provide them with alternatives to violence. Safe KC also emphasized swift consequences for those who refused to abandon criminal behavior. The program aimed to disrupt the cycle of retaliation that often led to multiple shootings, creating a coordinated response that involved prosecutors, police, and community organizations. City officials hoped that by targeting the root causes of violence and offering both support and accountability, they could prevent tragedies like the one that claimed Jassity's life. The program represented hope for a community desperate for solutions to an epidemic that had claimed too many innocent lives. In the weeks following Jassity's death, her family faced a choice that no one should ever have to make. They could allow their grief to consume them, or they could transform their pain into something that might prevent other families from experiencing the same devastating loss. Tamika Jenkins and Trish Mitchell chose the harder path. They decided to fight. The decision wasn't made lightly. Grieving families often retreat from public attention, seeking privacy to process their loss and begin healing. But Jassidy's family recognized that silence wouldn't bring their daughter back, and it certainly wouldn't protect other daughters from meeting the same fate. They began attending city council meetings, speaking at community forums, and reaching out to local politicians who had the power to create change. Their message was simple but powerful. Jassidy's death couldn't be in vain. If her life was going to be cut short, then her death had to mean something. The family's transformation from private grievers to public advocates represented a conscious choice to honor Jassidy's memory through action rather than just words. Missouri Representative Richard Brown became a crucial ally in the family's fight for justice and reform. Understanding the urgency of addressing gun violence in his district, Brown opened his doors to Jassidy's family and listened to their pleas for legislative action. The partnership between the grieving family and the experienced politician created a powerful combination of emotional testimony and political expertise. Brown provided the family with insights into the legislative process, while they provided him with the human face of gun violence statistics. Together, they began crafting proposals that could address the root causes of violence while honoring the memory of those lost to senseless shootings. Trish Mitchell, Jassidy's aunt, became one of the most vocal advocates for change in the aftermath of the tragedy. Her words cut through the typical political rhetoric and empty promises that often follow mass shootings. When faced with the usual responses of thoughts and prayers from officials, Mitchell delivered a statement that would resonate far beyond Kansas City. "There's never any action behind thoughts and prayers," she declared, her voice carrying the weight of profound loss and unwavering determination. "My Bible says faith without works is dead." These words became a rallying cry for families who had grown tired of sympathy without substance, of condolences without commitment to change. Mitchell's statement challenged both politicians and community members to move beyond passive responses to active solutions. She demanded that people stop offering empty comfort and start taking concrete steps to prevent future tragedies. Her biblical reference resonated with many in the community, framing the fight for gun reform as a moral imperative rather than just a political issue. Working alongside Representative Brown, Jassidy's family began advocating for specific legislative changes that could help prevent future tragedies. Their proposals focused on strengthening background check requirements, implementing waiting periods for gun purchases, and creating programs to address the root causes of community violence. The family understood that Missouri's political landscape made gun reform challenging, but they refused to be discouraged. They testified at hearings, met with lawmakers from both parties, and shared Jassidy's story with anyone willing to listen. Their goal wasn't just to pass laws. It was to change hearts and minds about the human cost of inaction. Jassidy's family discovered they weren't alone in their fight. Across the country, other families who had lost loved ones to gun violence were organizing, advocating, and demanding action from their elected officials. This growing movement of victim families brought a unique moral authority to the gun reform debate. These families shared strategies, supported each other through the legislative process, and amplified each other's voices. They understood that individual tragedies, when combined, created an undeniable call for change. Their collective advocacy represented hope that meaningful reform was possible, even in the face of political resistance and entrenched interests. Jassity Strong's tragic death offers profound lessons that extend far beyond Kansas City. First, gun violence doesn't discriminate, can shatter any family, in any neighborhood, at any moment. Jassity was simply celebrating her birthday when she became a victim of someone else's conflict, reminding us that innocent people pay the price for our society's failure to address violence. Second, the ripple effects of gun violence extend far beyond the immediate victims. Jassity's children lost their mother, her family lost their anchor, and an entire community lost someone who brought light into their lives. Every shooting creates countless secondary victims who must learn to live with trauma and loss. Third, thoughts and prayers without action are meaningless. As Trish Mitchell powerfully stated, faith without works is dead. Communities must move beyond sympathy to concrete action if they want to prevent future tragedies. Fourth, advocacy can transform grief into purpose. Jassidy's family chose to channel their pain into fighting for change, showing how personal loss can fuel broader social movements. Their courage in speaking out honors their daughter's memory while working to protect other families. Finally, prevention requires community-wide commitment. No single solution will end gun violence. It takes coordinated efforts from law enforcement, politicians, community leaders, and everyday citizens working together toward common goals. Communities serious about preventing gun violence must implement comprehensive strategies that address root causes. This includes investing in youth programs that provide alternatives to street life, supporting mental health services, and creating economic opportunities in underserved neighborhoods. Effective prevention also requires community members to speak up when they see warning signs, support families in crisis, and work with law enforcement to identify potential threats before they escalate. Programs like Safe KC show promise by targeting the small percentage of individuals responsible for most violence, while offering pathways to change. If Jassidy's story moved you, please like this video, subscribe to our channel, and share it with others. Every share helps spread awareness about the human cost of gun violence and keeps these important conversations alive in our communities. Jassidy Strong was more than a victim. She was a mother, daughter, caregiver, and artist whose life had meaning and purpose. Her legacy lives on through her children, through the advocacy of her family, and through every person who chooses action over apathy in the fight against gun violence. We honor Jassidy by refusing to let her story become just another statistic. We honor her by supporting families affected by violence, by advocating for sensible reforms, and by working to create communities where birthday celebrations remain joyful occasions rather than scenes of tragedy. Her life mattered, and our response to her death must matter too.